week we learned the first of the spiritual disciplines, and we learned about breath prayer and drawing in the Holy Spirit and letting out the concerns and the thoughts of our hearts, and using that as a way of centering ourselves during this Lenten journey. Well, today I want to just lift up the spiritual discipline of silence. And silence is different than just not talking. Silence, spiritual silence is not just the silence that's around you because you live by yourself in your home. But silence as a spiritual discipline is an intentional silence that prepares you to listen and to hear God's answer to your prayers, God's words in your life, God's presence be known to you. And so in the spiritual discipline of silence, you focus in silence for a given amount of time. And you'll be amazed as you begin of how long it seems that you're in silence when it hasn't even been a minute. And a true spiritual discipline of silence is to be able to be in silence for an hour. And during that time, listen without interruptions to the way the Spirit is moving within you. When we go to our spiritual retreats for my Gateway program as well as others, we will go in silence from our evening Vespers all the way through to breakfast the next day. It is a sacred space to be able to set aside that time and to not be influenced with what's going on around you, and to keep that place for you and for God. And so I invite us to just take our own silent breath prayer as we prepare for silence, and we'll enter into our silent prayer and be in that silent prayer for only a minute. It's only a minute, but it will seem like 5. But to just not think, oh, when's the silence going to be over? But just use that time to center yourself in on God and the way that God is going to speak to you during this worship service. So let us be in this time of silence. God comes to us in the silence of our hearts as we purposely shut out our agendas, our thoughts of what needs to be done, the busyness and sounds and energy that is around us. It helps us to be able to, in that silence, let God take control of our lives, that we can meet together in that silence and in that trust and in that time of sacred mercy, open ourselves up the way God leads us. We are affirmed and regenerated within that time so that we can focus upon the way that He leads us one day to the next. And so let us close this time of silence as we share together the Lord's Prayer by saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Our first reading today is from Genesis chapter 15, 1 to 12, 17 to 18. Afterward, Jehovah spoke to Abram in a vision, and this is what he told him. Don't be afraid, Abram, for I will defend you. I will give you great blessings. But Abram replied, O Lord Jehovah, what good are all your blessings when I have no son? For without a son, some other member of my household will inherit all my wealth. Then Jehovah told him, No, no one else will be your heir, for you will have a son to inherit everything you own. Then God brought Abram outside beneath the nighttime sky and told him, Look up into the heavens and count the stars if you can. Your descendants will be like that, too many to count. And Abram believed God, and then God considered him righteous on account of his faith. And he told him, I am Jehovah who brought you out of the city of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land forever. But Abram replied, O Lord Jehovah, how can I be sure that you will give it to me? Then Jehovah told him to take a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon, and to slay them and to cut them apart down the middle, and to separate the halves, but not to divide the birds. And when the vultures came down upon the carcasses, Abram shooed them away. That evening, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a vision of terrible foreboding, darkness, and horror. As the sun went down and it was dark, Abram saw a smoking firepot and a flaming torch that passed between the halves of the carcasses. So that day Jehovah made this covenant with Abram. I have given this land to your descendants from the Wadi Arish to the Euphrates River. Our second reading is Luke 13, 31 to 35. A few minutes later, some Pharisees said to him, Get out of here if you want to live, for King Herod is after you. Jesus replied, Go tell that fox that I will keep on casting out demons and doing miracles of healing today and tomorrow. And the third day I will reach my destination. Yes, today, tomorrow, and the next day. For it wouldn't do for a prophet of God to be killed except in Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that murders the prophets, the city that stones those sent to help her. How often have I wanted to gather your children together, even as a hen protects her brood under her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now your house is left desolate, and you will never again see me until you say, Welcome to him who comes in the name of the Lord. Word of God. Praise be to God.
We can almost understand where Abram was when he was having this conversation with God, where he was emotionally and spiritually. Because God had been in conversation with him before and promised that good things were going to come of his life. That he'd taken him from his homeland of Ur, and then he put him on a journey in caravans, wandering through places he were unknown. And all the time, Abraham was doing this through his faithfulness in God. And so at this particular time, God calls him and says that it is from him that the children of God would be coming, and that he would inherit the promised land. And so Abram's kind of saying, well, I can understand that you're going to be using me, and you're going to be using what family I have, but I have no son, so therefore it will have to be through my house servant, who's very close to me, and through him, he will be my inheritance. And the Lord said, no, you will have a son. And we know the story that goes with that, with Ishmael and Isaac. But what we remember about this particular passage is that God then takes Abram outside. So just this whole experience of Abraham, of having this conversation with God, and God's presence being with him, and not only just talking to him there, but he's saying, come on, Abram, let us go outside. You know, a relationship of camaraderie, a relationship of connection, and saying, look up in the heavens. Look and count them if you can. All the stars that are up here in the night sky. That's how numerous your descendants will be. And according to our scripture, Abram then believed. He believed that God, who spoke to him and cared enough about him to work with him until he understood what was going on, this was a God that was going to do wonderful things. And so God, in response to that belief, called him righteous. And throughout Scripture, we see him as being the righteous of God. We see him as being a man who walked with God. And we know that it is through Abraham that the three major religions have their center. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all go back to the roots of Abraham and the stars, the descendants that were pointed to within the sky, become that legacy of Abram. But even after this experience, as close as he felt to God and as faithful as true he was in the belief, he said, but, you know, how do I know? How do I know you're good to your word, God? You know, how do I know this is really true? And this is the part of the scripture that the teens like. And this is where he goes out and he says, well, what you need to do is you need to go out and you need to get an oxen, you need to get a goat, you need to get a ram, and you need to get a turtle dove and a pigeon. And then what I want you to do is I want you to cut the three animals in half and lay the carcasses one upon each other, but with a pathway in between them. And then don't slaughter the dove and the turtle dove and the pigeon. Just put them there. And so Abram did that. And then according to scripture, he was put into a deep sleep. And what happened during that time was God passed between those carcasses, the division of those carcasses. And Abram knew that the covenant between God and himself at that point was sealed. A legal binding covenant often was signed by such an act during biblical times. It wouldn't be three animals, but one animal would be slaughtered, and the two pieces would be divided. And one piece would be put on this side, and one piece would be put on this side. And then the two persons in the agreement would stand on either end of the pathway, one on this end, one on the other. They would make the agreement, and then they would pass through the slaughtered halves and return to the place where the other person was, thus binding the agreement that was there. Other places in the story of Ruth and Boaz, we know the agreement was signed by the exchanging of sandals. There are different ways to sign agreements, but this was the signing of a covenant, a sealing of a covenant. And Abraham knew that this was a connection that was made between him and God. And despite Abram's ups and downs throughout his journey with God, God did remain faithful. And his descendants went on to possess the promised land, to grow, and to escape from slavery, and eventually come back to the Holy Land and be there at the time when Jesus himself was living in that land. Jesus was there, as we know, sharing the gospel of Jesus, the gospel of God, speaking of God's stories, connecting those stories to the history of faith that had come from Abraham. And just prior to the scripture, we heard stories of him healing and exorcising demons and connecting with the lives of people who searched for God to be in their lives. And there was a point, and remember, we're talking about a time when, in Jesus' ministry, when he is focused now on his mission of going to the cross. And so in this particular passage, catches us a little off guard. Even though Jesus has had a little opposition with his preaching and his healing and his exorcisms, people kind of backing off and challenging him, he continued on his way. And here it's the Pharisees at the beginning of the story, who warned Jesus about Herod. And they said, Jesus, you might not want to go to Jerusalem. Because if you go to Jerusalem, Herod is sure to kill you. Now, I am sure that the Pharisees already knew some of the plots that were circulating around Jesus and around killing him and stopping the ministry that he had. But for them to warn Jesus was a little out of what we sometimes see as the character of the Pharisees. Now we know the scribes and the Pharisees and the learned people of the temple, they all had a place in the story, and they're very important in the Jewish faith, and they continue to be. They're not the bad men of the story. And in this point, you can see them with that white hat on saying, Jesus, don't go to Jerusalem. But he said, you know what? You just tell Herod, I'm coming. I'm coming in. I have something to do. And he said, you guys had your time. He said, there was a time that I was trying to gather you all in. There was a time that I was trying to get, God was trying to get all of you to come back and to worship him and to understand the way in which he's calling you. But that particular time's gone. But it's not too late. You can still come. But there was a time. Just let me go. Let me go to Jerusalem. That's where all the great prophets were killed. He said, I need to be in Jerusalem for this to happen. So we see Jesus making that connection with not only the people that he's healed and exorcised, but also a connection with the very people that are going to pass the judgment upon him. And throughout that, his purpose continues. He can't control what the other people are saying. He can't control the way the events then were able to move forward, but he could just be in conversation with them and saying, look, this is how it is, and this is where I'm going, and this is what I'm going to accomplish. And he firmly places his face towards Jerusalem. There are many things in our lives that we can't control. Abram couldn't control that he didn't have any children. Jesus couldn't control the mobs or who came before him. There are things that we can't control in our lives, and yet they're important pieces of our lives. Last week we talked about the loom as being a framework upon which we're able to lay threads, and then upon those threads weave other threads to make a pattern of fabric. And I shared with you that throughout Lent we're going to be looking at that weaving process, and we're going to be looking at those different parts of that weaving process as part of us weaving our own fabric of faith. And so as you look at the picture on the front of the bulletin, I used the same one as last week, so it's there. We see that framework, we see that loom that is there as the framework, and that being our faith. And we talked about each of our faiths being the strength of our lives, and what are the solid pieces of our faith that we're able to lean on in times of challenge, but also lean on when we're celebrating the positive and wonderful things about our lives. And so we see that loom as the framework of our faith. We see God as helping us to form that dependence, that trust in God. Well, today we're talking about the warp. The warp is when we take those, in our minds, those often tangled pieces of thread, and we lay them out on the loom. And we lay those out as vital threads of our lives. Now, the warp serves as the foundation threads in a piece of fabric. And one end of them is tied to the front beam, and the other end is tied to the tension bar. And it goes through the middle of the loom. These are the givens of our life. So each thread that we put into the fabric is an individual thread that is going to be tied on either end of the loom, and it will remain there throughout the whole process of weaving that fabric. It won't change. It might move aside with your tension and everything, but it'll stay there. And in order to maintain the integrity of the fabric, even if it slackens up or breaks, then you bring something in and reconnect it again so that thread remains from beginning to end. God was with us before we were born and will remain with us eternally afterwards. Every piece of our life has gone through him. The givens of our lives are things that we can't control, things that have no result of our decision to come to be. Who our parents are. We have no control over that, who our parents are. We have no control where we were living when we were born. If it was in the middle of Boston or if it was out in a log cabin, we had no control over that. We have no control over a motor vehicle running over a loved one. We have no control over a tornado coming in and taking down the trees on our block and devastating our house. We have no control on some things in our lives, and yet we think we do. And when we do think that we have control of all those things that impact on our life, we find ourselves all balled up, not understanding how we can move one foot forward because of that challenge of just perseverating on that piece of our lives that we really have no control over. And so I like us to envision those givens in our lives as the warp, those threads that are the initial foundation on our fabric of faith. One end is put on the beam, tied by God at the beginning of our lives. The other end will continue through our lives every moment, whether it's 1 year or 150 years, and it'll be tied to the other end. That will remain there. And those are the givens of who we are right now. And other givens will be added to that, perhaps. But they're tied on either end of the loom. Think of God's hands holding those ends, holding them taut, so that whatever experiences of our lives, whatever experience that come after our birth, throughout, that weave into where we were born, who raised us, if we lived in the city, if we lived in the country, and shaped us who we are, those are able to weave into the strength of God holding on to those givens that we can't do anything about. So God is able to help us to recognize those as vital pieces of our life of who we are. Who our parents are shapes how we develop as a child, as an adult. Whether or not we had a positive background or a negative background, it doesn't matter. It made us who we are today. And it's not a piece that we can pull from ourselves, but it is a piece that we can work with. We can accentuate the good parts of it, and we can push aside the things that are not therapeutic for us. And in the meantime, God is holding both ends of our lives, holding us as we weave these experiences. And so what we need to remember is that those are the givens. There's nothing that we can do about them. And even so, some of those warp threads kind of mess up my virtual explanation. They're added experiences throughout our lives of things that we can't control. Think of those also as those threads, and that God has somehow connected them on either end, and they're part of who we are. We can't do anything about it, but we'll know that at the end of the fabric, at the end of our journey, that those are the vital pieces that have held us together through all of this. They're the pieces that help shape our experiences. So this week, I'd like you to think about the givens in your life. What are those givens, and how have they shaped you into who you are? What was your childhood experiences like? What were some of the traumatic experiences in your life, and how did that impact you, and what went on during that time? And how then did those shape you, move you forward, or pull you in when they happened to you? And where was God in the midst of those? Or where could God be right now, tugging on them to straighten them out and just to take control of them? Because you really, once they're fastened on, you're not going to untie those until the fabric's done. So God has that firm control throughout all of that. And how is God holding on to those as you continue to weave the experiences of your life? Next week, we talk about the weft. And the weft are those experiences, that creativity, that pattern that you put into your life, and how that intersects with that which is already given. And our faith in God is able to pull that together into a pattern and into a design. It's exciting to know that before the first lights came into the world, God already had a plan. And God already had a plan of everything that evolved from that first breath upon the waters. And we are the exciting pieces within that plan. And as we journey through Lent, God is giving us this opportunity to focus a different way on ways in which our faith, which we are purposely looking at in different ways during Lent, can then become a very vibrant part of the fabric that unfolds for the rest of our lives.